Okay, I'm going to make some predictions. Let me start with Cuba, and then I'll talk about Iran, and I'll end with Hugo Chavez and Iran. We could hope it's the end of Hugo Chavez. That's another matter. So where do I see things going in Cuba over the next few years? By the next few years, I mean prior to Raul Castro dying. That's the critical transition moment. So I see the United States, as it has been doing, making unilateral concessions to Cuba on increased tourism. I'm going to see Carnival ships and Princess Line or whatever in Cuba before you know it. Freeing up the right to travel for Americans, as we've done. And what will the United States extract in return? You got it. You don't need math for this. Because what is it that we want? The main thing that we would like out of Cuba, I suppose, is that Cuba become a free society. Now, I wrote another book called The Logic of Political Survival, which is about how you run a government if you're a dictator or a Democrat, if you want to keep your job. If you want to keep your job, it's much better to be a dictator than a Democrat. Colleague and I are working on a next book, a manual for how to be a successful dictator. There's not enough literature to help people be dictators. But Raul has figured it out. Free speech, it's bad. Free press is worse. What's the worst thing for a dictator? Freedom of assembly. God, never let people assemble. 86% increase in the likelihood that you will lose your job next year if you let people assemble. Don't do it. It's a mistake. It's a terrible mistake. I teach a course on this. I'm training dictators. All right. So we want freedom for the Cuban people. By the way, that's not because we actually care about the freedom of the Cuban people, but because American voters care about the freedom of the Cuban people. And as long as we care about the freedom of the Cuban people, then the politicians will care because they also want to keep their jobs, so they have to do what we like. Now, it's not impossible to get Raul Castro to give a little on the freedom front, but it's only a little. I've analyzed this fairly carefully. He would like money, US dollars preferably, but you know, it's convertible currency, he'll take other money. He wants US dollars, and so the prediction is that we will allow a sufficient increase in remittances to Cuba in exchange for, it's pivotal, allowing some bloggers, this is this poor woman who's been arrested, allowing some bloggers to use the internet in Cuba to talk about politics. But of course, very few Cubans have access to the internet, so it's not so dangerous. After Raul dies, it's another matter. You might notice that Raul is following a time-honored pattern that is emerging among the world's dictators today. Inherited dictatorship. Used to be monarchy, now it's inherited dictatorship. Hafez al-Assad died, his son becomes the new president of Syria. Okay, he was too young, the Constitution didn't allow him, you rewrite the Constitution. Fidel has no children of which we know, so therefore you have the brother take over. I'm pretty confident that when Mubarak dies, his son will be taking over in Egypt. So that's kind of where Cuba is headed. Until Raul is out of the picture, no big change. After Raul is out of the picture, there's going to be huge change, as long as we don't give Cuba foreign economic assistance to get them to behave well. Because if we give them foreign economic assistance, if you're familiar with something the economists call the resource curse, foreign aid is exactly like the resource curse. It's just like having oil in the ground. It is a way for leaders to find a pot of money without raising taxes, which will make people want to rebel, to buy off opposition. We should not be funding that. Still going on, the students and dissidents are rising in power. Ahmadinejad is declining in power. By the way, he's not that important. In my data set of 90 Iranian players, he ranks 18th in influence. Think about who is number 18 in the United States. You're getting down there. Okay, so the evidence is that the accounts are increasingly that Jafari has taken over de facto, that Ahmadinejad is on the way down, that Khamenei has faced opposition unlike any opposition ever faced by a supreme leader of Iran before. So what does this mean for Hugo Chavez? Only a game theorist could think this way. Very bad news for Chavez. Chavez has invested a little bit of his, God knows what, in trying to build a relationship with Ahmadinejad, a man on the way down. They share in common a dislike for the United States, but I don't know what the polls would show in Venezuela. It happens that 70% of Iranians, Iran has legitimate polling, by the way. 70% of Iranians saying the United States is their favorite country. So he's backing the wrong horse. And this move towards pragmatism by Jafari and the Bunyads and even Khamenei is going to mean that down the road, a couple of years from now, Iran is going to be looking for much closer relations with the United States and with the European Union in order to get its economy going. And poor Hugo will have invested in the wrong people, and therefore he is going to be a big loser out of Iran instead of a winner. He is trying to forge this alliance that is going to do him absolutely no good.